This week's cold case is on Joan Risch. Joan Risch disappeared from her Lincoln, Massachusetts home on October 24, 1961. As always, let's rewind back in time to 1961 and see what was going on in the U.S. John F. Kennedy was our 35th president. While Enos was the second chimpanzee to go into space, he was the first and only one to ever orbit the Earth. Walt Disney's The 101 Dalmatians was released in 1961.
Come along, children. Bedtime. But we're not a bit sleepy.
CoverGirl's first makeup line, Clean Makeup, launched in 1961. The number one song in 1961 was Tossin' and Turnin' by Bobby Lewis. Joan, who was 30 years old, was 5'7" and weighed 120 pounds. She had brown hair and blue eyes and had been living in Lincoln, Massachusetts for 7 months with her husband Martin and her 2 children, Lillian and David. On October 24, 1961, Joan's husband Martin was out of town on a business trip. Joan got both children dressed as her daughter Lillian had a dentist appointment early that morning. She dropped David off with the neighbor for her to babysit him. She took Lillian to the appointment, and after the appointment, she cashed a check. She went shopping and was home by 11 a.m., fed the children lunch, and put 2-year-old David down for a nap. Lillian went out to play with the neighbor in the front yard. At 1:55 p.m., Joan took Lillian and the neighbor boy to his parents' home and left them at the swing set in the yard. She told them she would be back, then returned home where David was still napping. Around 2:15 p.m., the neighbor briefly saw Joan, wearing what she thought was a trench coat over her clothing, move quickly up her driveway carrying something red with her arms stretched out from her car towards the garage. At the time, she assumed Joan was chasing one of the children. It was the last confirmed time anyone saw Joan. Around 3:40 p.m., the neighbor brought Lillian back home. She went to the store, and when she returned around 4:15, Lillian went back to the neighbor's house and said, "Mommy is gone and the kitchen is covered with red paint." She also said her brother was crying in his crib because his diaper needed to be changed. The neighbor went over there, realized Lillian was right, and called the police at 4:33 p.m. The police arrived at the house 5 minutes later, and the police walked into the kitchen and found bloody smears on the wall, an overturned table, and the handset of the wall-mounted phone that was ripped loose and thrown into the trash can, which was oddly in the middle of the floor, not under the sink where it usually was stored. The police officer searched the house thinking Joan got hurt or perhaps harmed herself, but when he didn't find Joan, he called for backup. The police called local hospitals looking for Joan. They then tracked down Martin to inform him of the family emergency. He changed his plans and caught the next flight back. Let's go over some of the sightings that may or may not have been Joan. At 2:45 p.m. that afternoon, a woman wearing clothing similar to what Joan had last been seen in was seen walking along the north side of Route 2A, headed towards Concord. She appeared to be wandering, hunched over as if she were cold, and appeared untidy. Another sighting was of a woman with blood running down her legs, was seen walking north on Route 128 in the median strip in Waltham, between 3:15 p.m. and 3:30 p.m., just north of Winter Street. She, too, seemed disoriented and appeared to be cradling something at her stomach. Another sighting, reportedly around 4:30 p.m., had the woman walking south along Route 128. Let's go over some of the evidence. 3 bloody fingerprints were unidentified. In Joan's absence, they could not be compared with hers. A roll of paper towels was on the floor. One had been used to wipe some blood, possibly off of a hand. Police said later that while the bloodstains in the kitchen might have resulted from a struggle, they seemed more consistent with someone staggering around and trying to support themselves following an injury. But the kitchen was not the only place blood was found, and the blood found elsewhere in the house, as well as outside, complicated that narrative. A drop of blood was on the first step of the stairway. 2 more of similar size were found at the top of the stairs, along with 8 drops in the master bedroom and 1 near a window in the children's bedroom. Another trail of blood led out of the kitchen into the driveway. It ended at Joan's car, which was stained in 3 places: the right rear fender, the left side of the hood near the windshield, and the very center of the trunk. It could not be determined where the bleeding might have started, upstairs, in the kitchen, or the driveway. All possibilities supported by the evidence. Also open was the question of whether she had left under her power, or had been accompanied, or even carried, perhaps, unwillingly. The end of the trail in the driveway might have indicated that she had gotten into another car at that point, but that was not certain either. What they did not find was also puzzling. Despite the large bloody smears on the kitchen floor and the apparent activity elsewhere in the house, there was no bloody footprints. It was later said while it looked to be like a lot of blood, the amount of blood found would not suggest a life-threatening injury. During the investigation, police discovered that Joan had checked out some books from the library, one being about the disappearance of Brigham Young's 27th wife. Joan checked that one out a month before she disappeared. Another book Joan checked out was a book titled Into Thin Air. It was about a woman who, like Joan, had left behind blood smears and a towel when she went missing. A group of library volunteers who looked through records found that Joan had taken out 25 books over the summer of 1961, many of which also had to do with murders and missing persons cases. Joan's husband Martin continued to live in the same house and raise his children. He never had his wife declared legally dead. Martin passed away in 2009 at the age of 79. He always maintained that Joan would never leave her family willingly. If this story sounded familiar to you, it's because many throughout the years have called this case the original Gone Girl. If anyone has any information on Joan's whereabouts, please call the Lincoln Police Department at 781-259-8111. If you like this video, give it a like. Also, follow and/or subscribe so you don't miss any future videos. Make sure to check out our shorts and reels as we post daily. And if you have a cold case that you want covered, be sure to let us know in the comments. Thanks for watching. Bye, guys.